place where the best rugby coaches in the world go to fail. It's not a stadium. It's not even a country. It's one specific ground in Dublin, Ireland, where the Springboks hadn't tasted victory since 2012. "13 years of losses, 13 years of close calls, 13 years of walking off that field, knowing you had everything except the result." But Rassie Erasmus isn't like other coaches. He doesn't just prepare teams to win matches, he prepares them to dismantle opponents from the inside out. And when he finally returned to Dublin in 2024, he didn't bring a game plan, he brought a trap. The kind of trap that makes a team destroy itself while thinking it's fighting for victory. This isn't about one match. This is about understanding how the most calculating mind in rugby plays a game most coaches don't even know exists. Let's start with what makes Dublin so special and why it haunted every Springbok coach before Rassie. The Aviva Stadium isn't just home ground advantage. It's a fortress built on discipline, precision, and a rugby culture that's been refined over decades. Irish rugby doesn't beat you with individual brilliance alone. They beat you by making fewer mistakes than you do. They beat you by staying composed when you lose your head. They beat you by turning your frustration into penalties, your penalties into points, and your points into losses you'll remember for years. Every Springbok coach since 2012 walked into that environment with a game plan focused on one thing: match Ireland's discipline, while overpowering them physically. Every single one failed. Not because the Springboks weren't good enough, but because they were playing Ireland's game on Ireland's terms. Rassie Erasmus watched all of this unfold from different positions. As a coach, as a director of rugby, as someone who studies the game like a grandmaster, studies chess, and somewhere along the way, he realized something that changed everything. You don't beat Ireland by being more disciplined than them. You beat Ireland by making them abandon their discipline. You don't match their composure, you destroy it. The question wasn't whether the Springboks could play better rugby than Ireland. The question was whether Rassie could make Ireland play worse rugby than themselves. That's where the psychology starts. That's where most people stop understanding what Rassie actually does. Understanding Rassie Erasmus requires understanding that he doesn't see rugby the way normal coaches see rugby. Most coaches watch the ball. Rassie watches the referee. Most coaches study attack patterns. Rassie studies frustration patterns. Most coaches prepare for what the opposition will do. Rassie prepares for what the opposition will feel. And when you're facing a team like Ireland, whose greatest strength is their mental composure, feelings become weapons. Think about how Ireland plays when everything is going according to plan. They're structured, patient, methodical. They build pressure through phases, trust their systems, and wait for you to crack. But what happens when things don't go according to plan? What happens when the referee's calls start going against them? What happens when their scrum, usually so reliable, starts getting penalized? What happens when the player they trust most gets a yellow card for something they think is unfair? This is where Rassie operates. In the space between what should happen and what actually happens. The Springbok game plan under Rassie has always had layers that most people miss. On the surface, it looks like power rugby. Dominant scrums, big ball carriers, aggressive defense. But underneath that surface is something far more calculated. Every scrum isn't just about winning the ball. Every ruck isn't just about securing possession. It's about pushing the legal limits until the referee has to make a call. Every collision isn't just about gaining meters. It's about forcing the opposition into situations where they have to respond physically, emotionally. And when you do this against a team that prides itself on discipline, you're not just playing rugby, you're playing with their identity. Here's what most analysts miss when they talk about Ireland versus South Africa matches. They talk about forward battles. They talk about tactical kicking. They talk about backline moves and defensive systems. But they rarely talk about the invisible game happening inside the referee's decision-making process and inside the players' minds. Rassie knows that rugby isn't decided by the team that plays the best rugby. Rugby is decided by the team that handles adversity better. And if you can create that adversity deliberately, systematically, repeatedly, you don't need to be better than your opponent. You just need them to become worse than themselves. A discipline trap doesn't look like a trap when it's being set. It looks like normal rugby. Aggressive, but legal. Physical, but within the rules. Confrontational, but controlled. The Springboks, under Rassie, have perfected the art of playing right on the edge of what's acceptable, not over the line, right on it. And when you play on that edge consistently, something interesting happens to the opposition. They have to make a choice. Do they match that intensity and risk penalties? Or do they hold back and risk being overpowered? Either way, you're controlling their decision making. Either way, you're in their head. Let's talk about the scrum, because this is where Rassie's psychology becomes most visible. South African forward packs are traditionally powerful. Everyone knows this, but power alone doesn't win scrum penalties. Technique does, timing does, and more importantly, consistency does. When the Springboks pack down, they're not just trying to win that individual scrum, they're establishing a pattern in the referee's mind. First scrum, they dominate cleanly. Second scrum, they dominate again. Third scrum, there's a collapse. But the referee has already seen 2 dominant scrums from South Africa. Who gets the penalty? Now the Irish front row is under pressure. Not just physical pressure, mental pressure. They know the next scrum could be another penalty against them. So what do? They adjust their technique. They try something different. They push harder, bind tighter, change their angles. And that's when mistakes happen. That's when frustration creeps in. That's when a prop, who's never been penalized for scrummaging in his career, suddenly gives away 3 penalties in one match. But the scrum is just one example. The same principle applies everywhere. Breakdown penalties, offside lines, high tackles, holding off. Every aspect of rugby has a grey area where the referee has to make judgment calls. And if you can consistently put the opposition in positions where those judgment calls go against them, you're not just winning penalties. Because here's what happens when a disciplined team starts getting penalized. At first, they think it's bad luck. Then they think it's the referee. Then they start doubting themselves. And once they start doubting themselves, they stop playing their natural game, start overcompensating. They start making the kinds of mistakes they never make. And that's when they lose. Not to you, to themselves. The beauty of this approach is that it's completely legal. There's nothing cynical about it, nothing unsportsmanlike. You're simply playing the game within the laws, while understanding human psychology better than your opponents. You're understanding that rugby isn't just about physical skills and tactical knowledge, and the team that controls the emotional temperature of the match usually controls the result. Ireland's strength has always been their ability to stay emotionally neutral. They don't get too high or too low. They trust their systems. But what Rassie figured out is that everyone has a breaking point. Even the most disciplined teams will crack if you apply the right pressure in the right way for long enough.
So how does this all come together in a place like Dublin, where the Springboks couldn't win for over a decade? It comes together because Rassie doesn't just prepare for one match. He prepares for a moment, the moment when everything that's been building finally breaks through. Every close loss in Dublin before 2024 taught him something. Every penalty that went against South Africa was data. Every refereeing decision was information. Every Irish response to pressure was a pattern to study. And when he finally came back, he didn't come back hoping things would be different. He came back knowing exactly what needed to happen. The match in November 2024 wasn't won in those 80 minutes. It was won in the years of preparation before it. It was won in the video analysis sessions where Rassie studied not just Irish rugby, but Irish reactions to adversity. It was won in the training sessions where Springbok forwards practiced not just scrummaging technique, but how to scrum in ways that test refereeing interpretations. It was won in the mental preparation where players were taught not just to play rugby, but to understand the psychological game happening around them. When Ireland received 5 cards in that match, with 1 yellow upgraded to a red and the team reduced to 12 players at one point, it wasn't because they suddenly became an undisciplined team. It was because they were pushed into situations where discipline became impossible to maintain. Think about what it takes to make the most composed team in world rugby lose their composure. It takes more than playing good rugby against them. It takes understanding their DNA and then attacking it systematically. Irish rugby is built on trust. Trust in systems. Trust in referees to be fair. trust that if you do things the right way, you'll get the right results. But what happens when those systems seem to fail? What happens when the referee's calls seem inconsistent? What happens when doing things the right way leads to penalties anyway? That trust starts to fracture. Players start taking matters into their own hands. They start pushing boundaries they normally wouldn't push. They start making decisions based on emotion rather than training. And that's when cards start coming out. The genius of Rassie's approach is that he never needs to say any of this publicly. He never needs to admit that there's a psychological game being played. He can simply talk about scrums and breakdowns and physical battles. He can praise the opposition and respect the referee and say all the right things in press conferences. But the players know, the coaching staff knows, and most importantly, the opposition starts to suspect. Once you start thinking about the psychological game, you're already playing it. And if you're not as prepared for that game as Rassie is, you've already lost. Dublin 2024 was the result of all of this coming together. 13 years of waiting, 13 years of learning, 13 years of understanding that beating Ireland in Dublin wasn't about being better than them at rugby. It was about making them worse than themselves at handling pressure. The final score of 24-13 becomes almost irrelevant when you understand what actually happened. What happened was a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as a rugby match. What happened was one coach understanding the game at a level most people don't even recognize exists. What happened was Rassie Erasmus proving that the mental game isn't just part of rugby. Sometimes it's the entire game. And when you're facing a coach who sees rugby as a chess match played inside your mind, the question isn't whether you're good enough to beat him. The question is whether you're even playing the same game he is.